In section 2.2, we're going to be working to solve one-step equations. Key vocabulary we're going to need here is inverse operations. What are those? What are equivalent equations? And what is a reciprocal? So inverse operations are two operations that undo each other, such as addition and subtraction. And when you perform the same inverse operation on either side of an equation, you produce a new equivalent equation. So equivalent equations are equations that have the same solutions. When we look at the addition property of equality, that basically says that if I add the same number to each side of the equation, that's the additional property of equation. So if I have two things that are equal to each other and I add the same value to either side, I'll end up with a new equivalent equation. The example here is x minus a is equal to b. Then I can add a to either side, which allows me to isolate x, and I get x is equal to b plus a. And the same is true of subtraction, but I'm sure you're already familiar with that. In practice, in this case, I would go ahead and I would subtract 6 from either side of the equation. And what I'm left with is f is equal to 5. So in one step here, we have been able to solve. Now, all of these are equivalent equations to the first equation. Okay, so again, thinking about equivalent equations, they're new and they're different, but they have the same value. Right? And down here, if I add 4 to either side, I'll end up with y is equal to 7. Okay, pretty straightforward, and I believe this is stuff that you've already done pretty extensively. We can also do the same with multiplication and division. So the multiplication property of equality says that I can multiply either side of an equation by the same number and come up with an equivalent equation. And the division property says I can divide either side of an equation by the same number. And what that looks like in practice is if I have negative 17r here, I'm going to take either side of my equation and divide them by negative 17. And that leaves me with r is equal to 187 divided by 17 is 11. And because I have a positive number divided by a negative number, it's negative 11. Okay, down here I can multiply either side of the equation by the same value. So I'll have 6 times 8 is equal to x over 6 times 6. I do that because the 6's will cancel. And I'll get x is equal to 6 times 8, which is 48. Okay, again, I think these things are pretty familiar to you. Multiplying by a reciprocal, well, I need to know what a reciprocal is. Reciprocal is essentially an inverse. So if I have 2/7 here, its reciprocal would be found by flipping it over. So I would multiply by negative 7/2. And I do that because the 7's will cancel, the 2's will cancel, negative times negative becomes positive, and this just becomes v. And here the 2 will cancel with the 2 in the 16, leaving 8, and 8 times negative 7 is negative 56. And that's multiplying by a reciprocal. And if we look at this in a word problem format, my problem tells me that the Dead Sea during the period of 1999 to 2004, the maximum depth of the Dead Sea decreased by 9.9 feet. The maximum depth in 2004 was 1,036.7 feet. What was the maximum depth in 1999? Well, I know that the depth in 1999 minus the decrease will equal the depth in 2004. So if I call the depth in 1999 x minus the decrease, which was 9.9, it will equal the depth in 2004, which was 1036.7. If I add 9.9 to either side, I'll end up with x, which is the depth in 1999, is equal to 1037.6. Okay, and that's it for section 2.2.